going, everybody? This is Kevin Bradford, aka Kevin Corp, singer, songwriter, salesperson / budding entrepreneur. This is going to be a quick introduction, and then we're going to jump right into the interview. Go ahead, my friend.
Oh, excellent. Well, that was a quick introduction. Hey, Kevin, thanks for taking the time to come here and meet on Zoom. And let's talk about SpellGrounds and Khalsa Brain Games. For those who don't know, I'm Japji Khalsa, one of the founders of Khalsa Brain Games and creators of SpellGrounds.
Awesome. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I'm so excited to do this interview. I've always wanted to talk to you about all of these things. So here we go. We're going to jump right in. So I'm going to ask you some questions right here. All right. So first off, tell us about 1993. It was a very important year. It is even for myself. What were you doing at the time when you were introduced to magic?
I love that you asked that question. And for those who might have seen just last night, I shared the Jeff Brain interview with Kevin here. And so some of those questions are going to be the same taken from my perspective. And but I think it's a great question, 1993. I was heavy into gaming, mostly Dungeons and Dragons. And, you know, that was what gaming was. I mean, there were some board games that I was into, but the European board game invasion hadn't yet started. So mostly Dungeons and Dragons. And at that time, playing it, you know, I would go to game conventions. I guess I was sort of involved in the, you know, I started to become a little bit of a, you know, involved in the business, so to speak. I wrote a module that got played at Gen Con in Wisconsin back when they were back then. And, you know, so they flew me out to Wisconsin to help run this module. And, you know, I was yeah, it was pretty, it's kind of cool. Who knew, you know?
That's so cool.
Yeah. So, yeah, but, you know, so that's what I was doing in 1993, basically.
Okay, that's a lot. That's awesome. Yeah, 1993 was a big year, very big year. So next, how did you get introduced to Magic and other collectible card games, and do you play any of them yourself?
Well, I think that's a really great question because I love this story about how I got introduced to Magic. So we have a great game store in San Francisco called Gamescape. And,
okay.
You know, we go down there and again, it's kind of weird because now everything's all about board games. And at those days, it was all about role-playing games and miniatures, Warhammer and such. But I went into Gamescape at one point and it was an afternoon and there were some guys sitting there playing Magic on a little, and they're moving these cards around. I could tell they were kind of reading the rules and trying to figure out what to do. And I said, "What is that game?" And they're like, "Well, it's this brand new game that they're introducing that's just coming out. It's not out yet, but it's just coming out." And you know, they were here yesterday doing a demo. And what struck me about the game at the time was not the gameplay, because I didn't actually know how to play, and I'm not sure they did, but that the cards themselves were so amazingly gorgeous. You know, that whoever had designed this game had put so much time into making the cards beautiful.
Yeah.
Art, you know. And so, but that was not exactly the start. That was the very start. And I looked at it, I said, "Well, that looks fantastic. I'd like to buy some." And they're like, "Oh, we don't have any." You know, they were just kind of going through with the tour. We had some and we sold them all out. And I was like, "Oh, bummer. That just looks fantastic." And so as I'm sitting there, I'm looking at the guy's t-shirt and it's got the Wizards of the Coast World Tour. You know, it's like a rock tour and it's like all the, yeah, it's all the game stores that they're going to. And
oh, really?
Yeah, and all the dates of when they were going to be at the game store. And I looked on his shirt and I said, "Oh, they're at a game store in Texas right now, today, doing this demo."
Looking at the shirt.
At the shirt, I got on the phone. I think it wasn't before the internet, but it was, you know, before you could just look. I had to figure out the phone number. I called the game store. Now, and I said, "Hey, is there somebody named Wizards of the Coast doing a demo there?" And they're like, "Yeah, they're here." I said, "Awesome. Can I buy a case of cards?" I mean, I hadn't even played it, you know, and they're like, "Sure." And so a week later, I had a case, starter case of Magic Gathering.
Oh, wow.
Come to find out later that Dallas, or not, I'm not sure it was Dallas, but somewhere in Texas, that store was one of the co-investors with Wizards of the Coast. So
Oh, wow.
they had exclusive distribution to the cards at that point. And there's more to that story, but I'm gonna stop talking for a minute.
Okay.
There.
Okay. So you did end up playing after that, or did you just collect?
Right. So we did end up playing, and
Okay.
we had a Dungeons and Dragons group that would meet at this place called Coffee Zone, and Coffee Zone was a kind of a, you know, if you think of like a nasty pub in some, you know, D&D adventure where, you know, there's snarly people everywhere, that's what Coffee Zone was like. I mean, I think people were shooting up in the back. It wasn't exactly a pleasant,
Yeah.
but
Sounds like a great place.
yeah, the coffee wasn't bad.
Oh, well, that's good. At least we have that.
Exactly. So coffee wasn't bad, and they let us play Dungeons and Dragons for like hours on end. So we would play D&D. I had a group that was playing there, and so then I was like, hey, instead of playing D&D tonight, why don't we try this new game out? And you know, and literally within like 2 or 3 weeks, there would be 30 or 40 people at that coffee shop playing.
Oh, wow.
Playing Magic Gathering. I mean, like the word spread like wildfire that you could come to this coffee shop and play Magic. And here's the side story to the buying the cards. So I had this exclusive line that nobody knew about to this distributor, and so I would buy decks of cards from him. And some people would get them in some way, and then they'd mark them up, or they'd sell them for twice the price or 3 times the price, whatever. That's not what I did. I would take them to the coffee shop. I would sell them for face value, but I got to pick one card to keep for myself.
Okay.
And, you know, again, this, like Jeff had said in the video, we didn't know anything about, there was no secondary market. We had no idea that any of these cards would be worth a lot of money. We knew some cards were more powerful than others. We wanted them in our deck, you know, and so I was just trying to complete a collection, which I ended up doing. But so we would play Magic, and I would sell, you know, I'd sell these starter decks of cards and keep a card for myself.
Yeah. See, it's funny because that shows the inner businessman right there. You're like, well, I'll sell you for face value, but let me keep one, you know, keep building up.
Fair, you know.
And absolutely.
Actually lost friendship, I have to say. We rekindled it years later, but this guy had a starter decks of some sort. And he had cases, and he was selling them to friends at like 3 times the price. And it just annoyed me that he took advantage of his friends that way. And, you know, maybe I was wrong, but I like to be.
Yeah. So that's actually perfect for this next one, because I want to talk to you about the business. I want to know what was your experience with helping run a business? Because that's a huge venture. That's a huge undertaking.
Well, you know, that's a good question. And I've never actually, sort of a hyperbolic, but I've never actually had a job.
Okay, I respect that.
Anybody? I think I was a busboy for about 3 weeks once when I was like 16, and that didn't work out because I'm a horrible busboy. But I guess bus person is the right word. But I did dig ditches, so I'm not averse to labor as a kid. Never really held a job. And that's because I work in the entertainment business. I work in stage production, video production, and back in those days, you know, it was freelance. That's what we call it, freelance work. And so anything that I ever did was because I liked doing it. And so being a freelancer, you had a certain amount of hustle. You know, you had to hustle to get the work and care about people, you know, so.
No, absolutely. I understand that completely.
So that's what I brought to the equation of Khalsa Brain Games. You know, just that I knew I like to work, and I like doing what I love to do. And in that case, I was just loving what I was doing.
Oh, that's fair. Absolutely. So now Jeff left the company around 1997. Can you tell me about that? What was that?
Well, you know, the company was an interesting thing, and he mentions this in the video too, because he's Jeff's a great guy. You can tell that in the video. He's just a sweet guy. He's really nice, passionate about gaming, and but the dynamic of our relationship was we started and for those who like their little bit of history, there was Khalsa Brain Games,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the original name because it was the two of us. So when I bought him out, I removed the dash because it was just kind of a cool name, Khalsa Brain Games.
Yeah, absolutely.
Small, one little letter difference. No, Jeff, a really great artist, and but as he mentioned, he was working a full-time job as a teacher. He was recently married. That could put a lot of pressure on time, and at the same time, he was wanting to have kids and start a family. So, for me, I'm kind of a task. I'm a task drive. What do they call it? I crack the whip. Task oriented, and a lot of the stuff that I wanted help with, I wasn't getting help with, and then really that's on me because I'm very demanding, and so we had an amicable departure. It's like he just didn't have time, and I did buy him out for what I felt at the time. It was a little negotiation, a fair price. What does it take to buy out your company?
Yeah, absolutely.
But we've been friends ever since. No problems.
Yeah. No, and that's absolutely fair, and there's nothing wrong with that. I respect that. Absolutely. So the next one is, what is one key struggle that you had to overcome in order to produce the first batch of SpellGround Playmats?
Oh, I think it's funny how I don't remember the specifics of actually making the mats at that time. However that happened, it all came together. I think I was just plain lucky to find the right fabric, because literally across the store, I'll put a picture, across the street from the coffee zone was a place called Discount Fabrics. And it's in my neighborhood. I lived 2 blocks from there. So I went in there and looked at fabric that I thought would be cool for putting on the blank fabric to put on the table. And the fabric that we ended up with, which is now called V1, it was just pure luck that's what we got. And it was a beautiful fabric. It had its own problems. People don't, they sometimes when you give birth to a child, you forget about the pain of the birth.
Yeah.
So there were some problems with V1. A lot of times there was inconsistencies in the texture of the fabric. And if there are some V1s floating around out there that are they've lost a lot of the fuzz, or they never had it in the first place. So that was but that's not unusual. I think probably from a business perspective, the biggest challenge is when you do something like that is it going to be successful? Are people going to like it? Are we going to be stuck with all these things? And as I mentioned to Jeff, I think we had those doubts too. It's like, who's going to pay? Check this out. It was $15 for a mat at the time. You could buy a SpellGround for $15. So I think, the reason we put a pack of Arabian Nights into each SpellGround at the time was we wanted to make sure we sold all the mats. And Arabian Nights, a starter box of Arabian Nights was like $85 or something, so for us, we added, a $2 expense to each mat. And of course they did sell out. So I think it's just, having confidence and knowing, seeing where it's going to go and how to make that work. That was probably the biggest challenge for that first round,
And I imagine that's a huge thing with most people who are starting business.
Yes.
It's just the doubts.
Yeah, doubt, self-doubt. Those are things are hard to overcome. Yeah.
Yeah. Now with the V1 material, because that's pretty much one of the bigger questions that everyone talks about. It's touted as the gold standard for cloth playmats, and every couple of years, someone's like, we have the next V1, and it's never the next V1. So why can't you replicate that? What is the story with that?
Yeah, it is. If I could replicate the V1, I would. I mean, and maybe it was like super rich and didn't really care about making money, I could buy a fabric company and make my own V1. I'm absolutely certain we would never sell enough SpellGrounds to justify buying a factory. But,
yeah, fair. It's a huge undertaking.
Yeah. It's, it's the vagaries of not just the national marketplace, but the global marketplace too. There are a lot of fabrics that feel very much like V1. And we have tested them and seen them. And most of those fabrics come from China. And I don't really have a problem if it was right to buy that fabric from China. But they, when we tested those fabrics that feel like V1, they don't work for us. They don't hold up to heat. They shrink. So, when you're doing a screen print, you got a 26-inch mat, and now it's 25.5-inch on one side. And some folks who bought some of our early V4s, some of the V4s were a little bit wrinkled at the corners. So there's a lot of variables that go into each type of fabric. And there used to be a microfiber company, and I posted this on our Facebook page. There used to be a microfiber company out in New Hampshire or something, and they were making the V2 fabric. V2 was pretty darn good.
It's popular.
As close to V1 is, right? That's what I think. As close to V1 as anything. But they just shuttered their doors and shut down suddenly, and it was maybe 2008 or something. I can't remember exactly. And maybe after that, just the economy hit them. And that's not unusual for a lot of the textile industry in the Northeast these days to not be able to keep up with the prices of what's coming in from China. Mm-hmm. And again, the China, if the China quality were what we wanted, if we had maybe a China manufacturer that's like, okay, we can do all these things that you want in a V1, maybe that would work. But it's not something. I just don't think it'll ever come back to be exactly what V1.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's almost something. It's almost cool to know that it isn't replicated. It hasn't been for all of these years, because now people who have it, it's like a little piece, a little piece of history for them that they won't make again. It's